Mama. Welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, and this podcast exists to help scholarly mamas like you to achieve your life and academic goals without sacrificing what matters most. Here, we're changing the overwhelm, juggle, struggle narrative around what it means to be a mama on an academic journey to one of empowerment, fulfillment, and purposeful success. So how do we successfully navigate these journeys? Well, first, we need the space to embrace this unique blend. Let's begin by saying yes to creating a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, because that's when we truly become purposefully whole. So get ready for the most non-traditional, unconventional, and revolutionary approach to PhD motherhood, because one thing I have learned over my many years of experience on this journey is that if you want something different, you have to do something different. But you must be brave enough to think differently first. So, Mama, are you in? Fabulous! Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. Hello, mamas. Welcome back to the podcast. So lovely to have you here as always. Have you ever sat on a plane watching through the window as it slowly taxis toward the runway, feeling that familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety? If you've listened to any of my previous episodes, you know I kind of love a bit of a plane analogy. Actually, probably a good time to mention, if you haven't already, make sure you go back to episode 95, where I talk about going from being stressed and stuck to being submitted in terms of my thesis, how I finished it as a mama of 3. And also episode 97, which talks about going from feeling overwhelmed to winning an award. And I really use this kind of flight analogy in those episodes as well. But today I want to take it up a notch and I want to talk about expectations without expectation. Even I'm getting twisted. Expectation without expectations. So you're in the plane, you're looking through the window, it's slowly moving toward the runway, and you feel this mix of anticipation because you're going somewhere, and you know, you're finally on your way, like you're finally taking off, and anxiety because it's not a natural thing to be sitting in a piece of metal that needs to go up in the air. So you feel both of those things. That moment when the engine begins to really rev up and roar, pushing you back into your seat as the plane accelerates down the runway. And there's a critical point where the pilot must decide, continue toward takeoff or abort this trip, abort the flight, right? And so today we're going to talk about how to make sure that you are not carrying so much baggage from the expectations of other people that your academic dreams never get off the ground and you never actually achieve your goal. So let's talk about expectations for a moment. So for me, they're kind of like the weather forecast for your PhD journey. They help you guide your planning, but they're not something that should be held as absolute truth. And I call this expectation without expectations for that reason. And I know it's a bit of a paradox, but just stay with me. As scholarly mamas, you need to have a vision. There's no way that you are going to be able to accomplish this goal without having a vision. So having a sense of expectation of what you're going to accomplish, having faith, having hope that you're going to reach your destination, you are going to achieve this goal is really important because it gives us a sense of direction. It gives us a sense of purpose. And it's really key to knowing where you're going. You can't navigate to a goal that you haven't defined. You don't know what it is you want to achieve. So you need to have that clarity first, of course. But simultaneously, I think we really need to free ourselves from these rigid expectations about how that journey should look. I call these should tugs. If you come and join me inside my PhD with Purpose webinar, you'll hear me talking about should tugs. and especially those rigid expectations that are imposed by others. So important that we don't hold ourselves back from our true potential, from our purpose, because of the expectations of other people. And so if you listen to those previous episodes I mentioned, episode 95 and 97, I talk about going from feeling really overwhelmed and really stuck to finishing my thesis well. And one of the things that I really needed to do in order to do that and actually complete my PhD was to release myself from the expectations that I had around rigid timelines, continuous obsession with productivity and what my day-to-day should look like. And I have to say that making that mental shift was really critical in allowing me to finish well. So as I mentioned, I was stressed out, overwhelmed, ready to quit, very, very close to quitting. And to be fair, it wasn't the first time that I wanted to quit my PhD, but this time felt really heavy for me. You know, that, like I mentioned in the episode, that sluggish kind of weight just holding you back from making moves toward the goal, from taking action, because I felt so overwhelmed. And I think a part of that was the fact that I wasn't happy with where I was at. I felt like things were all over the place. I should have been further ahead with my writing by this point. I only had 16 months left. And, you know, obviously my supervisors were on my case to try and get things done. Don't get me wrong, not in an unkind, unhelpful way. I think in a very constructive way and supportive way. But there was still the weight of all those expectations. And then coming back to my PhD as a mama of 3 at that point was an adjustment I needed to make. And I had so many thoughts about who I should be as a mama. And I felt selfish for, you know, wanting to pursue my goals. And, you know, you've got these expectations about the kind of mom that you should be or the kind of PhD student that you should be. And that's really a heavy load to carry, really a heavy load to carry. The expectations around the timeline, I felt a lot of shame about that. The fact that I was taking such a long time to finish my PhD and I was doing it part-time, but you know, I was taking basically the maximum time allowed for part-time PhDs. And that didn't feel great because I had so many colleagues who were coming through and finishing. And I really had to be so honest with myself and say, you know, Michelle, this is not your situation. You are in a country, you're far away from, you know, your family. They would love to support you with childcare and all that stuff, but they're not physically here. You know, my husband and I had to navigate all of that. And we've got careers, we're working, we are navigating home life and doing all of that while I am, you know, coming back and readjusting to all of this after maternity leave. And it all just felt like a heavy load. And one of the first things I had to do, I coached myself out of making the decision to quit, and I decided to continue. So, of course, you'll reach points in your PhD where you've got to, you know, you reach that point of no return. You've got to decide whether you're going to push forward or pivot. And I decided to push forward. Doesn't mean that, you know, there's no right or wrong decision about this. I think it's just a personal choice. And for some very valid reasons, there are times where people have to pivot and walk away. But I decided to push forward. And in doing so, and preparing for my flight, preparing to get me to the end of this PhD, I had to release some of the burden that I was carrying. And so when you get to that point where you're at that critical point on the runway where you have to make that decision, do I take off? Do I abort this takeoff? Do I actually need to take a different path? You know, do I need to pivot? Or do I adjust my expectations and continue forward? And this is a moment that many of us face as scholarly mamas, that critical juncture where the pressure, the load, accumulation of others' expectations, of societal pressures, of our own perfectionism struggles create so much weight that our academic dreams struggle to actually gain altitude. And you may be facing this right now. Maybe you are in this valley of decision, and perhaps you've got pressures from your supervisors, your thesis committee, if you've got one of those, pushing for timelines that feel unrealistic for you because you've got loads of other hats that you wear and it just doesn't feel like you are going to make this. Or maybe these timelines don't really accommodate your family commitments. Maybe, like me, you've got peers who don't have children and they're progressing faster, and it's triggering all kinds of feelings of inadequacy and that you don't deserve to be on this journey. You are not enough. You can't do this. Or possibly you are just drowning under the weight of being the perfect mama while you're also trying to be the perfect PhD student. This, mama, is your runway moment. This decision is yours and yours alone. You see, when a plane prepares for takeoff, there's this fascinating process called weight and balance. So this is all about measuring exactly how much weight the aircraft can carry while it's still able to achieve the lift. And too much weight on one side or on the other side or in the wrong places means that this plane simply will not fly. Your PhD journey is no different. You need to perform your own weight and balance calculation. I don't particularly love the word balance. I prefer more of a blend or work-life harmony. I prefer those words that really represent how much of a mix, a messy mix this really is. I don't think this is a matter of a perfect or a clean balance. But if we were applying the engineer terminology to this and you're doing your own weight and balance, do you have too much load in the wrong places? Are these expectations weighing you down and preventing you from really, truly thriving in your scholarly mama journey? So how do we lighten the load? Imagine, yes, Michelle, I've got all these things, I've got all these weights, I've got all these expectations. How do I actually lighten the load? So here's how to shed those excess expectations. The first thing is to identify whose expectations are you actually carrying. Are these your PhD supervisor's expectations? Are these your family's expectations? Are these society's expectations? Or perhaps you've got your own kind of expectations from the person you were before you were a mama. You know, things that you were able to accomplish before you had children. You can't do it now, but the weight of those expectations is weighing so heavily on your heart, even though they don't serve you anymore. These heavy loads, in addition to coming from these expectations, they can also be coming from limiting beliefs. They can be coming from the burdens that we put on ourselves, these unrealistic burdens. They can also be coming from unaligned commitments that are not truly aligned with where we want to go and who we want to become. And one of the other things here about expectations as well is the importance of recognizing where you are in the journey. Don't expect high altitude when you are still on the runway or you are still in the climb. Recognize what stage you're at and be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace in these moments, because I cannot tell you how heavy of a load these unwritten rules that we think we need to live up to are really holding us back from reaching our true potential as a scholarly mama. You can have hope in the flight without being held back by the load of these expectations. You can have expectation and faith and belief and a vision and motivation, and all of that is available to you. You don't have to carry the heavy load of expectations and limiting beliefs and burdens and unaligned commitments. You don't have to carry those loads. Okay, let's move on. The next step is that you need to evaluate each expectation. Ask yourself, does this expectation support my core values and my goals? If it doesn't, this is excess baggage. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth. It is excess baggage. You know, it's one of the hardest lessons that I think I've had to learn on this journey, that, and not just, you know, a scholarly mama journey. I think this applies to life in general, is that not everyone is meant to go with you all the way. Not everyone in your life journey is meant to be there for life. Not everyone is allowed to have a say in what you do with your life. And so I think there's, you know, even though, yes, it's hard sometimes to see, okay, well, their expectations are excess baggage, it's helpful because I think the alternative is that you continue along this scholarly mama journey, carrying all this load and never actually achieving your goal, never actually thriving, but instead, you know, living in survival mode. Like, if you had the option to either thrive on your journey or live in survival mode the whole time, which one would you choose? You know, is that person's expectations worth you holding yourself back? Is it really worth that? I think this is a hard question for anyone to answer. You know, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do in a situation like that, where you are battling between, you know, the expectations of other people and the burden of those expectations, or the joy and freedom of being able to pursue your goals in a way that works for you. Like, no one can tell you what you should or shouldn't do in that scenario. But I think these are questions that are worth considering. These are some of the hard questions that as scholarly mamas, we do need to think about, we do need to consider, because everybody's going to have an opinion. Everyone is going to have an opinion about what you should or shouldn't do, whether you're doing it well, whether you should do it a different way, but you have to know what's best for you. What I do know for sure is that you cannot carry all of that on your two shoulders. It is just not the way. The next thing, and this is really crucially important, is really communicating your boundaries, advocating for yourself. This is so crucial. Everyone who is in all of your various circles, from your PhD supervisors or your family, your kids, they all need to really understand the reality of what you can or cannot carry. It's so important. This is a bit of a side note, but I shared this with my really close friend because I found this so hilarious. But I saw this reel on Instagram, and it was talking about, I think it was like a Jamaican family, and the brother was coming to the sister's house, and I think the sister was traveling home to Jamaica, and she was getting ready for her flight, and the brother comes over. It's like one of these like hilarious reels. The brother comes over in his strong Jamaican accent, which I love, by the way. And he's like, you know, I need you to take these things for my family, for Auntie Sue and Auntie this buddy and Grandma this and cousin this buddy and the next person. And he's bringing all these things, like literally bringing, it was like a huge life-size metal giraffe. There was a cat, a live cat. There was chocolates and all these things. And it was so hilarious. And for those of us who are of Caribbean origin, we can all relate to this, because I think it's part of the experience of living abroad and going back home, and you want to give all these gifts to people. It's part of our culture, right? And there are these expectations that come with that, where you are expected, if you are visiting from abroad, that you will bring gifts for people, that you bring things, you'll give them things from over and away. And the reason why I think it's hilarious, I mean, obviously that reel was meant for comedy and entertainment, but the message is really the same. They're just some expectations and weights and loads that you have to shed, and you cannot carry on your flight. You cannot carry them all on your scholarly mama flight. You cannot carry the weight of all of these expectations on your scholarly mama journey. It's too much to carry. It's too much for one person to carry. And so the reel ended with, basically, I can't carry all these things. Like, this is ridiculous. And it was so hilarious. But when I thought about this podcast, I realized that it's the same message. There are just some things that you cannot carry. And so, the weight of all these expectations is one of those things. And so for me, that meant that I couldn't deliver all, the most perfect thesis. And that's fine, because a finished thesis is better than a perfect one. So I had to get really real with that, right? Maybe I needed to modify my timeline. I was hoping to submit my thesis way before my actual deadline. I only submitted it 6 days before my deadline. So I did not expect, before I got into that point in my PhD journey, I thought I would be submitting this thesis way early. And I had to make the adjustment in my mind of my own expectations that actually that's not possible in your current circumstances. It is not possible. You are going to need to adjust that timeline, and maybe you need the maximum time, and that's okay, right? Maybe I needed people to not judge me based on my ability to work through the weekend or have some impromptu evening meeting. Maybe I just couldn't say yes to that. And that was okay. I had to communicate my boundaries. And those kind of conversations are game changers, because these are the conversations, whether it's with your PhD supervisor, whether it's with a family member, that really allow you to relieve yourself of some of that weight and relieve yourself of the expectation that you can work like someone who doesn't have children, because that doesn't work. And also just giving yourself permission to embrace a schedule that honors both your academic goals and your family life. That is okay as well. So when you release yourself from these external expectations, I believe that something absolutely magical happens. Like a plane that needs to shed unnecessary weight, you find yourself accelerating down the runway because you've got a renewed purpose. You know who you are. You've established your boundaries. You've done your weight and balance checks. You are ready to take off. And then that moment of liftoff becomes so possible. It becomes possible. When you release yourself from these traditional timelines and traditional productivity hacks and things, you can not only finish your PhD, but you can finish it well, right? You can finish it well. By freeing yourself from others' expectations, you create the mental and emotional space to do truly innovative work. I believe that this is what took me from being overwhelmed to award winning. This weight and balance check, this shedding the unnecessary loads, this having expectation for yourself and what you want to achieve and what your goals are without expectations that are keeping you back from thriving. And so when you are at this point of no return on your journey where you've got to decide whether you're going to push forward or pivot, this isn't about persistence at all costs. It isn't about just burning yourself out, trying to keep up with all these expectations and carry everything on your flight. That's not what it's about. It's about strategic decision making, right? Really understanding when to commit to certain things or even recommit to certain things, and when you need to redesign your approach. Because I know the sunken cost fallacy is real for scholarly mamas because we feel we've invested so much time. I felt like that as well. I was 7 years in, feeling completely overwhelmed, wanting to quit and thinking, well, do I throw away all of the years I've invested in this or do I keep going? And I chose to keep going, and I'm happy that I did. But we need to be aware that there is that temptation that you've invested so much time and you need to keep going. But I think true scholarly mama wisdom in this situation is really knowing the difference between committing to something and redesigning the approach to it. Maybe you need to shed some of the load. Maybe it's not that you can't achieve the goal, it's that you need to go about it in a different way. So this is my challenge to you. This week, I want you to identify one expectation that's really weighing you down. Just one. And then I want you to begin to think consciously about how you might decide to release yourself from that expectation. What might that look like for you? What barriers come to mind when you are facing this choice? And how would you feel at the other end of it? That, when you've managed to free yourself of that expectation, how would that make you feel? I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message on Instagram, send me a DM, and let me know, what is the expectation that you have released yourself from? That you've given yourself permission to just not be held back by. Yeah, what expectation is that? I'd love to know. So here's the thing. You can continue on this scholarly mama journey all by yourself, or you can come join us inside Scholarly Mamas. You can do so from scholarlymamas.com, because these are mamas who are navigating these exact scenarios and are feeling the weight of it and are finding creative ways to navigate that. You don't have to navigate scholarly motherhood alone. You can come join us inside Scholarly Mamas. Your new purposeful village awaits. I really hope that this podcast episode has been helpful for you today, reminding you that you don't have to choose between being a great mama and being a scholar. You just need to create and choose your own flight path. The flight path that will get you to the finish line, to achieving your goal without sacrificing what matters most. Remember that the sky is the limit and this is just the beginning. Until next time, mama, keep those dreams soaring. I'll see you in the next episode. Sending you lots of love and gratitude. As always, bye for now. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you did and you want in on this movement, please head over to mrsmummyphd.com or scholarlymamas.com. If you want to do your PhD well without sacrificing yourself or those you love dearest, then you need your hands on all the ways that we can work together to transform your journey of scholarly motherhood from one of overwhelm, disillusionment and burnout to one of scholarly joy and purposeful success. Make sure you head over to mrsmummyphd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. I cannot wait to work with you. Remember, mama, these are our journeys of becoming.